Good afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome Detective Chief Superintendent Neville Jones, former head of Cheshire C.I.D, and Mr. Robert Connolly, lecturer in human anatomy at the University of Liverpool. And this afternoon we're going to be having a conversation about Lindow Man, but I think I'm right in saying that this is not the first occasion on which you two have met, is it?
No, indeed. We met on the 6th of August 1984, didn't we?
We did indeed.
Digging up a certain well-known body.
Yes.
So you haven't actually met in the last 20 years?
No, not at all.
No.
So what's it been like for you to say hello again this afternoon after all this time?
Yes.
Very interesting to reminisce about
That's
those
right.
days, some
Yes.
20-odd years ago now, and talk about the interesting exhumation of Lindow Man from the wilds of the Lindow Common at Wilmslow.
And that was in August 1984?
Yes.
Right. So you got together, you met, that was the first time you met, and it was part of the investigation of Lindow Man, but that wasn't the first time that the police had been interested in Lindow Moss, because I think a rather gruesome discovery was made the year before on the Moss. Is that right?
Yeah, some 6 months or so prior to the events of Lindow Man, the police, we were investigating a murder allegation where a man was alleged to have murdered his wife and buried her in the vicinity of the Lindow Common. We didn't find any remains of this lady, but what was discovered was a skull which was eventually dated as to being Roman, and certainly not of any current interest to the police.
Yes, I think we've got a photograph of the skull here, and this has come from your site investigation box, I believe, and this has been quite exciting for us to see at the museum this afternoon, because I think I'm right in saying this is the first time that archaeologists have seen the contents of the box. Is that right? Would that be fair to say?
Yes, since the trial, the offender was sentenced to life imprisonment and did not appeal, and the papers relating to the police investigation remained in secure archives in the police headquarters. From there they've remained ever since. The skull was ancillary to the discovery of Lindow Man, but of course it played an important part in the investigation, because the discovery of the skull prompted the police to interview the alleged offender, and as a result of that interview he admitted murdering his wife and burying her body in the vicinity of the Lindow Common.
So when the skull came to light, it was assumed, perhaps understandably, that this might be the remains of the missing lady, the lady who disappeared, yes?
Indeed, we thought that this is another piece in the jigsaw in the case against this man.
Right.
And we were rather surprised and not a little shocked when Oxford University did a carbon date on the skull, and turned out it was some 1,500 years old.
So it wasn't the remains of the missing lady?
Indeed not. No.
No.
Nevertheless, the suspect still admitted that he had indeed murdered his wife.
Perhaps we can bring in Robert there, because I think, Robert, you have a new interpretation of this, don't you?
Yes, I mean, the Home Office pathologist then, Dr. John Benstead, he brought this, he phoned me up and said, I've got a skull and I could have a look at it. And he brought this into my room in the university, and we examined it. And we said that it was not more than about 20 or 25 years old. It certainly, if it had been buried in peat, it wouldn't have looked like that at all. I mean, there's something missing. It had a bit of scalp with some black hair on it at the time. That was washed away when it was cleaned up to be photographed. But no, we declared that it was about 25 years old, which was what the police wanted to hear. But then they radiocarbon dated it. But the radiocarbon date is wrong. I mean, it is wrong. I don't think there's any question about that.
So do you think these were indeed the remains of the missing woman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah. I mean, it had black hair, and hair doesn't remain black when buried in peat for 1,500 years. It will be brown, pale brown, orange. And the skull itself was not demineralised. You could prod it with a spike, and the spike wouldn't go in. It just was not demineralised. There was quite a lot of brain present. There's a bit of an eye, which you can see there, a bit of an eye, and a bit of optic nerve. That is not preserved in peat for that sort of length of time.
And Professor Connolly has never wavered from his view.
No.
From the initial examination of the skull, he came to that conclusion and has never wavered from it since.
And several other people who have seen the skull agree that it is recent. I mean, Dr. Benstead was quite convinced it was of that sort of antiquity. But
I should point out, Bryan, if I may, that at the discovery of the skull, we searched in the immediate area of Lindow Common for other parts of a body without any success at all. We did recover, because as I say, the peat is processed and travels to various parts of the country for the growing of mushrooms, and a brooch and a pin, which was later identified as being of Roman origin, were found from the locality that the skull was found. And they had been transported down amongst peat down to Somerset, and we recovered a brooch and a pin, which were later identified as being Roman. But no other part of a body has been found in that area at all.
Yes, a very distinguished forensic artist did do a reconstruction of a face from this skull, and it was quite clearly the lady in question. There wasn't any doubt about that. He had never seen pictures of the lady. There's a slight deformity over the right eye, which we hadn't remarked upon, which he picked up and drew, and it was quite clearly her.
I think that's really. I think that's.
Sorry. Yes. Yes, there's a slight deformity which we hadn't really spotted, or hadn't remarked
like
upon.
Like a protuberance, I think.
Yes, it was of no interest to us. But when the artist drew the face, it became apparent who it was.
But I think that's extremely interesting. Right at the start of the interview, we've discovered something that perhaps we didn't know, certainly archaeologically, because I think in the archaeological literature, it's got to be known that this initial discovery had been radiocarbon dated and that it was thought to be Roman. But what you're saying very clearly, I think, is that despite the radiocarbon dating, this appears to be a much more recent remains, and that it's likely to be the remains of the missing woman.
25 years ago, radiocarbon dating wasn't always right. It is now pretty accurate in most cases, but burials in peat bogs where you've got flow of water through very, very, very many layers can influence the date. But as I say, 25 years ago, dates were often wrong, and things have improved a great deal. But I still maintain that was incorrect.